Welcome into the Illini Cast podcast. Austin Berkland alongside Sunny Verma. This isn't a episode that we really wanted to record, but a episode that we needed to make to talk about Terrance Shannon Jr. and his rape charge in the city of Lawrence, Kansas. Sunny, welcome in. It's going to be a tough episode, but again, an episode that we need to make.
Yeah, this was an episode where we could have gone forward with our normal Thursday schedule and released an episode yesterday, but Austin and I kind of had some conversations back and forth, and this is such a touchy, careful subject that we wanted to kind of have as much information as possible to discuss. If we had gone on air yesterday, we would kind of make a lot of presumptions and possible insinuations. And Austin and I, the subject matter is so, we have to be so careful around it. We decided to wait for the press conference today, Josh Whitman, where, he enlightened us a little bit more on the details, which I'm glad he did. And, we will discuss a little bit later. But yeah, if you're looking for pure, sports, whether, it's a football team or information about the basketball team, the play on the court, at least, they play Farley Dickinson today. This is probably not going to be that show. Today, we're going to kind of discuss a little bit more about what's happened in the last 48 hours, essentially with the Terrance Shannon news. And again, it's not a fun day. This is one of the most unfun days as an Illinois fan I've had in a really long time. And but that's what we're here for. We're just here to kind of talk it out, Austin. You and I, the best we can, and move forward.
Yeah, this is also a guy in Terrance Shannon who was the media darling of the Fighting Illini basketball team. He was an All-American candidate on a lot of midseason teams and all that. We'll get to the basketball portion in a later episode of how this impacts the Illini. But this is a guy who this kind of charge, if it does stick or not, will be with him for the rest of his life as well. So this is kind of really touchy on Terrance Shannon's life, not only on his basketball career, but his life in general. Whether or not the charges do come to fruition or not, at the end of the day, when the Lawrence court system has its day. But a little bit about that Josh Whitman press conference. I'm glad he had it so quickly. He gave us details of the Terrance Shannon case, but also the process of the University of Illinois and how they determined the suspension, which I thought was awesome to hear about, where he talked about the legal system as one parallel, the school system as the other parallel, and then the Department of Intercollegiate Athletics as the third parallel, and then they sometimes intersect depending on the information that needs to be shared between the three systems at large. So I really appreciated learning about the process of the system and how Terrance Shannon's suspension has gone so far and where it can go in the future.
Yeah, I will say when this news broke yesterday around 1 p.m. Central, for the next couple hours, it was one of those where you're just kind of reflecting and you're wondering, hey, as details were slowly starting to, come out, you're like, did the university do the right thing? How long have they known? How come he's been on, our media, our social media? Like, how long have they been aware of something like this? I mean, we're well aware of there's some, sports programs out there who are willing to kind of hide the fact and just the wins are more important than what justice and whatever might be. At the conclusion of this Josh Whitman press conference, and I don't have your thoughts on it, Austin, but I'm at least very comfortable saying that I do believe that the University of Illinois did all they could. They followed a very stringent process, and I have no qualms about the way that they handled things, from at least from the details we got from Josh, from the details that they were provided. Supposedly, and I know we're going to get into it. They didn't know the extent of such allegations until essentially we did. He mentioned he read it straight off of social media, which is kind of how you and I got the information. So there's obviously no winners in this story, whether it's short term or long term. But what I was afraid of, and what I've always been afraid of, is I love the University of Illinois. I got one of my degrees from there. I've been following them for as long as I remember when it comes to their athletic programs. I'm kind of comforted to the fact that we do hold ourselves to some sort of level of integrity that I know is kind of going away with a lot of college athletics right now, with money running things. And at least that part of this whole equation, I feel much better about. And again, which is why I'm glad you and I are having this conversation now, as opposed to asking these questions if you and I had recorded yesterday.
I mean, there are ultimately two things that you want as a fan of any organization that you are cheering for. Number one, you obviously want wins, but number two, you want a feel good organization to cheer for. And after this Josh Whitman press conference, I feel more confident in my fandom of the Illini because of the process that Josh Whitman laid out, where coaches aren't involved in the process, where Josh Whitman is involved to a lesser extent because of the processes that are already documented and laid out. And I don't feel like there was any hiding going on of this. And I feel like when the press release happened yesterday, there was the there was a word that really stuck out to me, and that was the word actionable. And I think it's a little different knowing that it comes from Kansas rather than a local municipality having the same charge on an Illini player, because I feel like the windows of conversation are much more limited. Like Lawrence, Kansas really doesn't care about what's going on at the University of Illinois basketball program or the University of Illinois Department of Intercollegiate Athletics. Locally, I feel like the conversation would be a little bit more open, just simply because of the contacts and that are in place there. So I think it is difficult for Josh Whitman and the DIA and the school at large to really make any huge conversations or huge actionable items without all that information. So now that they had that information, I feel like they did all they could right now, and then the panel will review in 48 hours and decide if this suspension will hold up or not.
And we have to keep in mind that Whitman himself, like, he went to law school.
Yep.
I mean, he's one of the most careful. Like, any word he says is on purpose. He's very careful in the word verbiage that he says, and I'm talking about any interview, whether it's talking about athletics, the business, funding, whatever it might be. He's very careful in the manner of which he speaks, and so I now, like, I don't know why I doubted it before, but what he said today at the press conference, like, of course he was very careful with this. Like, now that I had 24 hours to kind of sleep on it, this is a man who, as he talked about when he basically took over the reins, like, they, redid the whole process to make sure that, you know, only the vested parties that, how do I word this? Like, we're directly involved with the investigation. We'll let the details come out. As you mentioned, Coach Underwood found out about this essentially at practice yesterday, at the conclusion of practice. Like, he had heard something that might be going down, but he obviously did not know the extent either. And, Whitman said himself, he's like, I don't want, the coaches are not involved because I don't want them to do their own investigation, of which is not their expertise. And as fans, like, that's all we can kind of ask for, because obviously, we hope in our hearts that Terrence is, innocent, and this will all go away. But what we both wish for, even more than that, is that justice prevails. Whatever the story might be, what we both want is whoever is in the wrong to be punished, and all the evidence and everything come to light, and ultimately the right decision is made. So yeah, with Josh Whitman, like again, I've always been a fan of his, and I'm glad and I'm proud that he's running the sports program that I cheer so hard for.
Yeah, a couple money quotes from Josh Whitman on this. This is from Jeremy Warner's transcriptions of IlliniInquirer.com. DIA is not an investigator. That is not the role we play. We do not have the expertise or personnel to investigate these claims. We rely on information from law enforcement or the university. Then he goes on to say, we make a decision based on resolutions from law enforcement, university, etc. The difficulty in these processes take time. The challenge is what you do in the interim. That's why they designed the student athlete misconduct policy. I mean, that's all you want to hear as a fan and as a human being, that the athletics aren't coming first, that this is a process where they are, or it's dictated by law enforcement and not by the athletic department as well.
Yeah, I mean, step by step, as you talked about, now there's going to be essentially the next step is that there's an advisory board. Is that what he called it? I forgot what the
It
verbiage he used.
It
He's
is the misconduct panel. It has somebody from the School of Law. It has somebody from the Chancellor's office, and someone from the Student Affairs Council. So those three will decide if the punishment is lowered, or if it's extinct, or if it holds up. Is essentially what they're going to decide on this indefinite suspension of Terrance Shannon Jr. based on the facts they have. And then if more information comes out, then they can reconvene and discuss the suspension further as well. But then once the law enforcement investigation completes and there's a basically a verdict on the case, then it goes back to Josh Whitman's hands on the long-term punishment of Terrance Shannon Jr.
So just to back up a little bit, basically what has gone on in the last 24, 36 hours is the University of Illinois, under Josh Whitman at least, has established essentially a rule that should some sort of warrant be issued for an athlete in the program, something is triggered right away, which suspends said player from all team activities. And that's what happened yesterday. Just for clarification for everyone, this is not anyone reviewing evidence. This is not anyone, based on. It was simply the fact that a warrant was issued, and that triggered the automatic suspension of Shannon. And so, as Austin just put it, now that there's a panel of three people who I'm glad to hear. Like, you're talking about, it would be troubling, or if you had said, there's the man in charge of men's basketball is on the board. There's these seem like very as neutral as you can get when it comes to this situation, at least. People working from the law side. It's like it's different perspectives, but none with really skin in the game. So hopefully these three individuals can look at the evidence, whatever's provided to them, have some honest discussion and conversation, and make the correct decision, whatever it may be. But again, I'm just trying to highlight that process, at least in my brain, makes sense. I'm glad. The automatic trigger, I totally understand. Hey, let's just, you don't want to keep playing him when there's a rape charge out there. Like, okay, let's go ahead and trigger an automatic suspension. And again, he talked about in the press conference today, Shannon's still allowed to work out. He's still allowed to use the facilities, all this. All he's suspended from right now are the team activities, because we have to be careful. We all have to be careful that there's been stories recently, that are pretty similar to this, where all of a sudden, the athlete was shown to eventually be innocent. And so, in the slight chance of
Ariza and Duke Lacrosse are two major examples.
yeah, I was thinking about the Ariza situation. That kid was the best punter in college football. I think he wasn't he drafted in the first round? I think he was drafted in the first or second round,
He
like very early.
very early for a punter, yes.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
very
what
early.
round it is,
Yeah,
but he got charged as part of a gang rape on the UNLV campus.
and so he was essentially immediately released, and he had this court case essentially been going on for 2 years now, I think, and only very recently it came to light that the charges were dropped. And this poor kid now, like, he, he's been cheated out of millions of dollars, of a future. Like, he could be on his third, fourth year in the NFL right now. He's got this for the last 2, 3 years. He's been dealing with this. Like, anyone who meets the guy thinks, oh, this is the guy who raped so and so. He threw his career down the drain. Well, no, it's only time that showed us that that wasn't necessarily the case. So, trying to circle back with Shannon, it's one of those where we have to treat all parties with as much respect as possible. And, it's just, I don't know. It's I think we've done an honest. We, as in the university, has done good by Shannon. Um, Again, as you said, we don't have all the information because all the information is coming from the Lawrence PD. You know,
Here
Mhm.
Here is the timeline with the Lawrence Police Department in relation to the University of Illinois. This is all from Josh Whitman, again transcribed by Jeremy Warner of Illini Inquirer. Last September, Lawrence police requested an interview with Terrence. Inquiry was light on details, short on specifics. Had conversation with TJ, but about this weekend in KU was very forthcoming in a detailed visit. Nothing triggered cause to discipline. Whitman goes on to say, learned over a few days he was subject of inquiry, but details were limited. TJ offered nothing additional and obtained his own counsel. Learned later that allegations surrounded something public in a bar, which included inappropriate touching, again, light on details and unsubstantiated. And then Women goes on to say, asked Lawrence Police Department for something more concrete to initiate the misconduct policy, but nothing was forthcoming. I don't say that in a judgmental way, but the fact was we didn't get additional info despite requests remained away until Wednesday. Early Wednesday, got a phone call from UIPD that Lawrence police would send an arrest warrant for Shannon. That arrived mid afternoon when team was practicing. That's the first time they saw a police report and formal documentation. That was on early Wednesday, according to Josh Whitman.
It's tough to believe, but it's just him finding out exactly when we did. Brad Underwood essentially finding out just shortly thereafter at the conclusion of practice. I can only imagine what the players are going through right now. It's if Josh and Brad found out then, the players pretty much probably just found out right at the conclusion of all that. So it's tough. It's there's no right way to proceed with this. He's obviously a vital part of our team, a vital part about the community. Being a Chicago guy, he had that local the fans there. It's unfortunate from him. I don't know him personally, but everything I see from him, he seems like a decent kid. And it's just it's I don't know what else to say. It's super unfortunate, and I'm just, at least I'm happy one side, and that's the University of Illinois seems to have done the whole process the right way.
Yes, the Illini have their ducks in a row to be as supportive of Terrance Shannon Jr. as possible, yet while being the same supportive presence for the Lawrence Police Department, for the victim, and for the alleged victim, and for everybody involved. I mean, this is such a touchy event that happened that it just is hard to really fathom all that Josh Whitman has going on in his head right now, because you don't want to push Terrence away too much, because then you're open to lawsuits and other things as well for keeping him away from huge earnings in the NBA if you completely shoo him away. but yet you also don't want to welcome him in with open arms right away, because what if he did do things that were extremely bad to this alleged victim? I mean, that is a tough needle to thread for Josh Whitman, but I do love the anchors that the University of Illinois has to help protect all parties involved.
Yeah, it's a matter of like you have a relationship with Terrance Shannon, and like you've had conversations with him, and obviously his lawyer has declared his client being innocent and that he plans to follow through with the trial, et cetera, et cetera. So of course you have a certain sense of a loyalty to your player, but you also have to respect the nature of this accusation, and just and the justice system. So it's hard to kind of walk the tightrope in between. I think thus far, we've done a pretty decent job, and all we can hope for is that it doesn't seem likely that Shannon's ever going to be able to put on at least a Illinois basketball jersey again, but it's beyond that now. My case at this point is just, yeah, I'm bummed out for the basketball team, and where we could be headed, but this is way bigger than that, and it's a dark day for Illinois sports, but at this point, all you, as you kind of said so perfectly in your tweet, like I just hope ultimately um, the correct person is punished, whoever it may be. Might be the alleged victim, it might be Terrence for doing something inappropriate. I just hope that eventually enough evidence presents itself where the resolution is agreed upon by all the parties involved, and it's just we can kind of move on from all this.
I mean, this is the best quote from Josh Whitman, in my opinion. I feel very prepared and I feel confident in the decisions we've made. I mean, that is what you want out of a leader of a department. And I feel like he is setting Illinois up for success regardless of however this Terrence Shannon case ends. A couple big timeline notes for the future. There is a preliminary hearing for Terrence Shannon Jr. in Douglas County, Kansas on January 18th at 3 p.m. And then, of course, within 48 hours to 72, we should know the resolution of Terrence Shannon's suspension from the panel of the University of Illinois. So those are the two major dates in front of us in terms of the news aspect of it. Obviously, there's Big Ten basketball games, Fraley Dickinson tonight. We'll talk about that at a later date. It's not appropriate to talk about now, but in terms of the news items, January 18th and pretty much 72 hours from now is when we should hear more about Terrence Shannon's preliminary suspension.
Yeah, at the very least, once we record our preview episode for the Northwestern game, which I believe is on Tuesday night, Austin and I should have an update, at least for what the updated decision is going to be on the initial suspension for Terrence Shannon. So, you know, again, as Austin said, it's not really appropriate to talk about how this is going to affect the basketball team right now. There's a time and place for that, and you and I will absolutely get to that. But we just kind of want to record today and just kind of discuss the details as we know it. As they come in. Follow us on Twitter, whether it's Illini Cast, Austin, or myself. We'll be throwing information out there. It's one of those where it's a bummer. We're all excited for this basketball season and where things could go, and but as I said, some things are just bigger than basketball. And if nothing else, if you take nothing else from this show, at least, I want you to know, from my perspective, I'm proud to be an alum of the University of Illinois. I'm very happy and satisfied with the process thus far, led by Josh Whitman. And we're just kind of all on standby, and we'll all kind of wait and see. And as we get more information, we'll have further thoughts.